Hello and welcome back to LBG Reviews. Please be sure to like and subscribe. I'm sure if you've been familiar with gaming news at all within the past few days, or actually the past week at this point, you've heard about that one game that caused most gaming marketplaces to come crippling down to their knees because nobody could actually purchase the game because of how many people were trying to buy it. That game, if you are familiar with that situation at all, is Hollow Knight Silksong, the sequel to a game that I talked about a few years ago at this point. Now, to preface, anybody who has been playing Hollow Knight Silksong for the past week, I am not getting super in depth about builds, about the mechanics of the game, largely because of a few reasons. Number one, if you've seen and listened to my Hollow Knight video that I made a few years ago, I was aware a few years ago that I would never be able to beat Hollow Knight, mostly out of my own lack of desire to push myself through that hardship. And a similar thing can be applied to Silksong. While I've been loving the game, I've made some decent progress over the past first few days. I'm also not good at it, and that's okay. Now, in terms of accessibility things, one thing that I did touch on in my Hollow Knight video that I think is important to bring up when regarding Silksong is in the original Hollow Knight, there was an equipable item known as the Wayward Compass. The Wayward Compass would point out your exact location on the map. However, there was a strong community, there was a very vocal community, I should say, of people who played Hollow Knight who basically were like, if you wore the Wayward Compass while beating the game, you haven't truly beaten the game yet. And that comes from a few places. One, the developers of Hollow Knight have said that their goal for the map for the game was that the areas were distinct enough for you to be able to recognize where you were without need for the compass if you didn't want to use it. And also that same sentiment also comes from largely a similar group of people who have played not like basically people have played like Dark Souls and other extremely challenging games where things like that are like extrinsically helpful but not for like say dealing damage or pulling off some bizarre mechanics and tricks. Uh, those kinds of people are like, if it doesn't serve, if it if it removes from my ability to do X, Y, and Z, nobody should use it. And I have a problem with that because, well, yes, for the most part, in the earlier areas of Hollow Knight, I was able to easily recognize where I was. As you progress in the game, the set decorations and like the decorations became like sometimes for me as someone with a visual impairment, they became harder to distinguish what was actual wall and what was set dressing. And Silksong, to bring it back to the actual point of this video, Silksong also has a compass that you can equip that will point out your exact position on the map. However, this situation is a little different. See, in Silksong, there are no the system that Hollow Knight used is not here. Because in Hollow Knight you had things called charms that had a specific cost and would take up a certain amount of the resource called charm notches for you to be able to equip them. In Silksong, you don't have to worry about charm notches. However, Hornet has these basically there are these things called crests. And that's a whole bit of Hollow Knight lore that I just learned about that I'm not even going to get into because it is absolutely absurd, wild. It boggles my mind to think about the lore implications. I'm excited to see tons of videos about it after a while, but trying to explain like the lore implications of it is even beyond the scope of this video. What it matters for the sake of this video is each crest in the game changes the gameplay in some way. You start off with the Hunter crest, which is the default movement and attacks. There is the Wanderer crest, which is the only crest I currently have, apart from the Hunter crest, which reverts the attacks and movement to more of what the original game was like. However, all crests also have tool slots. There are 3 colors of tools: red tools, blue tools, and yellow tools. Each crest has a certain amount of slots for each color. As an example, the Hunter crest has 2 slots for red tools, 2 slots for blue tools, and 2 slots for yellow tools. The Wanderer crest, if I remember correctly, it only has it has slots for like yellow and blue, but no red or something like that. Basically, different crests have different slots available that you can make use of to ensure that you have the proper tools at your disposal based off of the playstyle you want to use. And one of the yellow tools you can equip is the compass. And it works basically exactly how the Wayward Compass charm did in Hollow Knight. And I think it's important to note that while yes, it does take up a slot for other things that you could put there, Silksong, at least in my experience, apart from a few exceptions, does very well at giving you lots of opportunities to switch out what tools you have equipped. It always provides benches for you to go to sit down at, rearrange your loadout, and head back out there and try again on whatever you were trying to do. Now then, in terms of other accessibility issues, this is also where I dip my toes into a little bit of a controversial take. There are a lot of people out there that say that like if you use like mods or other things to make the game easier, what is the point of even playing the game at that point? And to me, basically for me, that answer simply says is if you are not willing to suffer through learning, you are not worthy to appreciate the world, to appreciate the gameplay. Basically, get good or leave us alone. And to me, like, that is extremely harsh. Like, at least to me, the ideal situation is more like a game that I'll be talking about next week, Celeste. In Celeste, the developers of the game give you settings and options that allow you to make the game easier. However, they also do note that, hey, we designed this game to be hard. But at the same time, we understand that people want to enjoy our game without it being too challenging at times. If you need these settings, no harm, no foul. Like, that is how I think it should be. It is the acknowledgement that, hey, this was intended to be hard, but it's also fine if you don't want it to be so hard because everybody should be able to enjoy every game. That does not mean that everybody will enjoy every game, but everybody could enjoy every game is my ideal version of the world. And that's my little tirade about the get good culture over. And that's really all I've got to say about Silksong and that whole deal. I absolutely love the game. I thought the entire situation was hilarious about it breaking online storefronts. But yeah, next week we'll be talking about Celeste, a game about climbing mountains and confronting your own self doubts and feelings of inadequacy. So yeah, see you guys next week. Bye.